Hey, and thanks for joining us on the BioAg podcast. It's something new that we're doing, and it's myself and my colleagues. Josh, say hello.
Hello.
Bill.
Hello.
Okay, that way when we ask questions later, because there is an audio only version of this that we publish, and we don't want somebody chiming in down the road and be like, "Oh, hey, that's a new voice. Who is that?" So we are here. Hey, Bill, why don't John's your buddy. Introduce him. You suggested him as a guest, so you take it away
Yeah,
here.
I'm glad to do that. I've known John. I was thinking about this morning for over 2 decades, probably pushing three. John and I raised our children together. I watched him be a dad and then become an organic dairy farmer. When I first met him, I think you were just starting to transition into with Organic Valley. Isn't that right, John?
Yeah, we started that transition 22 years ago now.
Okay. So yeah, and so we did a lot of life together. I watched. We farmed down Elkins Road where John lives. We leased property down there, so I'd drive by and was able to always keep tabs on what that farm looked like because I remember seeing it prior. But yeah, John and I have known each other a long time, and I've always considered him a good friend. And he's made this farming thing work for him. And a lot of guys that came out of what he did, conventional farming during those years, didn't make it. And, that's a testament to the farm model that he's done. Anything else we should introduce you with, John?
No, I think that about gets it. Yeah, you've seen the transformation of our farm over the years.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of the looked as kind of backwards for a while. I moved into our neighborhood, and right across the road was another dairy farm.
Mm-hmm.
And the old guy who owned the place uh, came up to me as he saw me planting pasture, and he says, "Oh no," he was an old Italian guy. He says, "You got to grow the corn. You got to grow the corn." And I said, "No, I'm gonna do the pasture thing." So yes, they've been out of business for a while now. So
Yep.
so it's
Well, John, maybe we should start there.
Muted. Sorry, I'm muted. I violated my own rule. I made sure I muted my
yeah.
microphone. No, what I was starting to ask John is, uh, did did you always want to get into dairy farming? I think your family is dairy farming, but did you want to follow that path initially, or did you want to do something else?
I'm not exactly sure what I ever wanted to do. I'm still not so sure what I want to be when I grow up. But I grew up on the dairy farm, and it was a great place to grow up on. And I got done with college, and there was a spot on my dad's farm to come back to, and so I came back there, and my brother was already back there. Farming with dad, and I realized my spot was not going to be there on the original family farm in Yam Hill because there just wasn't room for me to try new things out. So we found our own place in Monmouth, and really, it's uh, I can't say I was an intentional dairy farmer, but it was what I knew. I really loved growing up with it, and I was pretty good at it. So that's what we've done, and I can't complain one little bit. It's been a great way to live, a great career choice for me, and it, the great part about it is I get to learn stuff every day. It's this big experimental place I get to try all sorts of things with all the time. So that's the cool part about it. I was a biology major in college, loved microbiology, Um, and so that stuff always fascinated me, and the farm is just a way to really play with all those aspects of biology, because everything's it's so wrapped up in microbiology. The whole farm is driven by microbiology.
Yeah, it's one big living laboratory.
It is, and it's a cool thing. Yeah, it's a cool thing.
So, John, our listeners are far-reaching, broad, from likely dairy farmers are going to listen to this. They're going to know a lot of things that you're talking about. But I also have some friends, and I'm sure my co-hosts have friends that are not farmers. They may garden, and so I want to start basic, and then we'll really get into the good stuff here on the organic farming and the transitions and real nitty gritty. But I want to start with some basic questions, like,
Okay.
what is a dairy cow? We think of dairy cows, we think of the black and white cows, but there's all kinds of dairy cows,
Yeah,
right?
there's a lot of different varieties of dairy cows, and my family started with Jerseys. My great grandfather had Jerseys, and my grandfather had Jerseys, and my father and my uncle had Jerseys, and my brother and my cousins had Jerseys, and I've got Jerseys. They're a smaller breed. Um, they produce higher butter fat content, not as much milk as the big black and white ones, and they fit perfectly for what we do. So we're a grazing dairy. We need to have our cows out in the fields grazing, and anybody who knows anything about Oregon knows it's a little wet here in the spring and the fall. Sometimes it's really wet right now, and having a lighter cow that doesn't weigh as much is really important for what we do. And so that's what we milk. So we milk these Jersey cows. They're about 900 to 1,000 pounds each cow, instead of being a 1,500 cow, which makes it a lot easier on our soil. And if you think of the microbial part of what we do, microbes need air in that soil, and if you have too much compaction from heavy animals on wet soils, the microbes aren't happy. So we're all, and whether you're doing a garden in town, or you're doing farming of whatever you're farming, it's all microbial driven, and we got to really look. We all have to look at the same thing. I mean, the whole ball of wax is driven by the same microbial system. Uh, so that's where I might do dairy farming, but anybody who does anything with any soil or any kind of animals or anything is in the same microbial soup that we are.
Hmm. John, I wanted to jump in there really quick. And it's great to pursue the, soil microbe environment, but I wanted to talk about cows specifically to
Yeah,
follow up with.
sure.
Tell me about your selection process of your Jersey cows, which they were kind of fancy, showy, pretty cows that ran in a conventional system, but you transitioned to organic and grazing. How many of those guys had to go by the wayside and you began to select for cows that could function in your system?
Well, the good part about the Jersey breed is they were never, cows are ruminants, right? And they're supposed to be out eating forages in the field. That's their job. I mean, that's what they're a ruminant, just like a sheep, just like a elk, just any ruminant, goats, and so they're intended to go out and graze this wet feed out in the fields and graze a lot of it. And so the kind of cow I need is a cow that has really big stomach. I mean, she has to have a huge stomach, because they've got to take in, to be effective grazers, up to 300 pounds of grass a day. And they're taking in 300 pounds of grass a day, and they spend a third of the day actually just eating, chewing, just physically taking it off the plants, and a third of the day is spent regurgitating it and chewing it finer, so the microbes in her stomach can break that down for her. And so I need a cow that's got two things: a big stomach and good feet and legs to walk around with, because they got to do a lot of walking too. So, you've gone by my place for years, Bill, and my cows have to, there's a half mile down, half mile back. They do it twice a day. There's 2 miles, and then any walking in the fields they do when they're in there. The cows are putting probably 4 miles on every day easily. So I need cows that can take and carry all that forage around with them really well and effectively too. So um, I call my cows, the perfect cow is a pasture hog. She's kind of short to the ground, not too long of legs, big old round thing that can take a lot of forage in, and is strong. I need a strong cow. So and that's what we've selected for over the last well. So we've been organic for 21 years, but we've been on this farm for 31 years now, I guess. Um, so for 31 years, we've been selecting for the same thing, and really, in effect, so was my grandfather and my father before me, and that's where all this line of cows come from. So sometimes it pays not to veer too far away from what was done in the past. Sometimes it pays to just go dramatically different route, but sometimes some good ideas then are good ideas now.
That was really interesting that you said that about how you select for a lighter cow based on the soil. 'Cause that was going to be my next question is why choose Jerseys over other dairy
Yeah,
cows? And that
yeah,
makes a lot of sense that a, a lot of thought went into how that grazing and the weight and the traffic affects the soil, because a lot of times we hear that with grazing, soil compaction and things like that. So that was really interesting.
yeah. And there's a couple other things. A Jersey's brown, so they're out grazing. A brown cow can handle heat better than a black cow. So that brown cow can handle more heat during the summertime, when things get a little toasty around here. So we have that goes for these cows as well. Plus, sometimes you just wait around and the market comes back to you in farming. So for years in the dairy world, so I can look back and see my father's days in farming and my grandfather's days in farming. My grandfather dairied down in a little town called Ferndale, California, and it's in extreme northern California, about 2 hours from the Oregon border, down by the redwoods. And when he dairy farmed, they would milk the cows. He milked Jerseys because they're high in butter fat. They'd milk the cows, separate out the cream, make butter, and the butter would get on a boat and be shipped down to San Francisco. And all the milk, all the what was the drinkable milk was fed to pigs, because there was no market for that. The market was for butter, and butter was really what drove the whole system. And so it went. That was what farmers got paid for in my grandfather's day. And then my father got into a time where cheese started. The interstate roads came in, and cheese started becoming more popular, and so they were making cheese, so it was utilizing all the milk, and butterfat was still really very valuable. And then there was that weird little time in like the 70s when margarine, all the doctors said, oh, don't eat butter, eat margarine because that's healthy for you. Well, we kind of learned that's not maybe so the case. But when that happened, the dairy world didn't get paid anything pretty much for the butter fat. And so everybody started shifting heavily to Holsteins, the big old Holsteins, because they didn't give a lot of butter fat. They gave a lot more milk, a lot more fluid milk. And fluid milk was what was driving the thing then. And since then, we've seen it flop right back to where butter's sexy again. The majority of dairy products are really, there's more cheese being consumed in some parts than there is fluid milk. So fluid milk hasn't really been the main driver. It's been the solids in the milk, and that's what jerseys do well. So, I just waited around, and the market came back to me.
So the higher butterfat essentially gives you more variety in the products you can produce over up. I'm limited to milk. In this case, you have some breadth. I can go over here if butter's more popular. I can make cheese,
Right. Ice cream. Yeah. All those
ice
things.
cream.
Yeah. The
Hmm.
consumers decided butterfat was not evil after all. And guess what? It tastes good too. So,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
getting hungry. Thank you guys.
yeah, you're welcome.
How many times? How often do you milk your cattle?
They get milk twice a day.
Is it
Milk
4 a.m.
twice.
and 4 p.m. or do you have what time?
Yeah. 4 a.m. and 3 p.m.
Okay.
And,
The only reason why I asked is when I was in college, I had an opportunity to work at the dairy farm, and of course, I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I expressed an interest, and they said, "Well, can you be here at 4 a.m.?" Well, I live 30 miles away, and I started backtracking the time. I thought I'm going to have to get up close to 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, I think I'm going to pass.
yeah. 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 Good choice there. Good choice there.
But I did work Black Angus cattle one time, only
Yeah.
once during
All
the
right.
summer.
Well, yeah, they're not quite as docile as a milk cow, but you don't have to get up at 3 a.m. for them either. So
Right. Yeah. But they can kick pretty hard, especially when they're getting neutered.
yeah.
So also along those lines, while we're working through dairy cow, ho- what is what's the lifespan or effective milking life cycle for a Jersey or an average milk cow?
Well, it really kind of depends. So in the conventional world, the average lifespan for a cow is less than 4 years now, I do believe. And what we aim for is 10 years on our herd as a minimum. We're wanting a 10-year-old cow because that's where uh, a cow is if she's given a chance to live how a cow is supposed to live, not on concrete all of her life, and out grazing and not being really pushed super hard. We all have the ability to put out more output, right? I mean, if I was pushed, I might be able to run 2 marathons back to back, but I'd pretty much be dead after that. They'd have to cart my carcass off, and I'd be done. Uh, and that's kind of what we're asking some of these modern day ag cows to do. They're kept in confinement. They're fed huge amounts of grain to allow them to milk a lot of milk in a short period of time, and it just kind of burns them out. So, we look not to burn the cows out. We're looking to have a cow that is real functional for a long time, and because that's really where um, uh, the profit lies in our business, is having a cow around for a long time. So, it behooves me to try and give them a lifestyle that lets them live a long time. So, it depends. The answer depends on how the cow is treated, raised, fed, because a cow that's um, given high levels of grain, uh, her stomach goes acidotic, and so there's a lot of acid produced in that stomach. I talked about how cows who graze, they eat 8 hours a day and they regurgitate their food, chew their cud for 8 hours a day. Well, every time they burp that stuff back up, they add saliva back into it and send it back down. So you're not getting that acid build up in the stomach. You're getting more of a base thing. And guess what? Microbes like that kind of a system. So that more base stomach means they don't have acidic stomach, and if a cow gets an acidic stomach, she has all sorts of health problems. She'll have bad feet and legs. She'll get mastitis and sick more often with infections of the mammary gland, and so you know a cow that grazes a lot is also a cow that's a lot healthier because her whole system's healthier because the microbes. Again, we're back to the microbes. The microbes are a lot healthier because she keeps chewing her cud, chewing that finer. A cow that's fed a lot of grain, she doesn't chew her cud. She has no reason to chew her cud as much because she's not taking in forages. She's taking in grain that breaks down without needing to regurgitate it.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's so you have a lot of biological processes going, and it's really, again, go back to the microbes. If I can keep the microbes healthy, whether in the cow or in the soil, I win.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. And I'm sensing a transition here. Oh, Josh, did you want to ask something?
yeah, I had a quick question that I've been curious about as a novice when it comes to cow farming. What happens after the 10 years with the cows once they reach the end of their life? Is it
It,
leather jacket hamburger time, or is there a
it,
retirement home for dairy cows? What happens then?
it really depends. It really depends. So I've got three different streams we send these off to. One can be hamburger. One can be the market and hamburger. Um, One can be as cows that other people, backyarders want a cow that will give them enough milk for their household or raise a calf or two for them. And so some of them go that direction. And we're starting to raise our calves instead of taking the calves away from the cows and bottle feeding them. We're starting to raise calves on cows. So we'll take some of those older cows that don't quite fit the milk herd anymore, put calves on them, and then graze those pairs running around the farm. So
Really,
there's
I got to jump in, John. That is very unique. That's really interesting in the dairy world.
there's been people. I can't claim to a whole lot of original ideas. That's not my. I don't have a huge amount of them, but I'm really good at stealing good ideas and plugging them into our farm. And I had seen some farms doing that, and I was just really impressed with how the calves looked. I was just trying to figure out how we'd make it happen in our system, and part of this is being pushed by my son who's back on the farm now. He really wanted to try this, and the impetus this year was that his wife's pregnant for the first time, and she's due in July. So I said, well, let's raise the calves this year on all cows, and gives her a break from feeding calves, and we get to see how it works. So right now, I've got seven calves running around up here, little squirts running with their mothers up in the fields up here, and actually not with their own mothers because we put two calves on each cow, and so we take another cow and put them on her because sometimes if a cow has her own calf, she won't accept another one. But if it's neither one of her calves, a lot of times they'll take them right on, and there we go. So just
Back to milking, real quick. I had one follow-up question, which was on average, per milking session, how much volume will you typically receive off of?
well, for per day, it's about our average somewhere around 5 gallons a day, about 40 pounds per cow per day. So about 5 gallons per cow per day is where we're at in the summertime. In the wintertime, they produce less. They produce more like 4.5, but their butter fat's higher. So you basically get the same amount of butter fat per cow, whether it's summer or winter, just more volume of fluid milk in the summertime with a little lower percentage of butter fat. In the wintertime, it's a little lower amount of milk with a higher percentage of butter fat. So that's kind of how we meter it on our farm.
All right. I saw something in doing some research, reading some articles that you were in, watching some videos, and I saw New Zealand come up. Did you pull? Is there something from New Zealand? Is there grazing practices, something that you've adopted from them? What's unique about New Zealand and grazing there?
New Zealand had to learn, so back, I think it was in the 80s, New Zealand changed the style of how they paid their farmers, and they took subsidies away from the farmers, and the milk price crashed, just absolutely crashed. And farmers had to figure out how they were going to stay afloat, and so they got really good at grazing cows, really good. I mean, New Zealand's a long way from anywhere, so most all their milk is exported to China and England and Europe and all over the world. So they had to become low cost producers, and the way they did that was become really efficient at grazing cattle instead of doing the system that a lot of farmers in the U.S. have done, where they confine the cattle and drag the feed to them and do all that. They realized pretty fast that they had to do that, or they were going to be out of business. So they had a lot of innovation. So I've taken some of their innovation and utilized that, whether it's in the fencing that I use or the cows, because a lot of the genetics I use are actually from New Zealand, because they really focus on grazing. So their cows, their genetic bases fit really well for grazing. I don't want to take and use bulls, semen from bulls from a lot of the U.S., because so many of those cows are on a system that I don't use. They're on concrete being fed a lot of grain, and those certain cows are going to do better than others, and I don't want to pick from that genetic base. I want to pick from a genetic base where the cow's been proven from eating, from grazing. So
Yeah, that
that's
makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Well, let's talk about that, because you weren't always organic, and before we get into that, help us understand, walk us through what organic means. I had my air conditioning repaired this morning, and I said to the technician, I said, all I ask is that you're out of here before 9 a.m. because I'm doing a podcast. And he asked, about what? And I explained, we're having a dairy farmer on today's organic dairy farming. He said, well, what's organic? What does that mean? No antibiotics? I said, yeah, and then some. You're going to have to listen to the episode, find out.
Well, I always like to say organic is twofold. It's what it isn't, uh, which is the regulatory stuff, and what it is, and that's the important stuff. So what it isn't is what we can't use. We can't use antibiotics and pesticides and herbicides, hormones, um, commercial fertilizers. We can't use any of those. Um, but so that's the thou shalt not. And there's reasons why thou shalt not. Really, there's some really good reasoning behind that. Why thou shalt not on all those things, as far as soil health is concerned and cow health is concerned. Uh, but though what it is more important for how we run our farm, and what it is focusing on grazing cows and cow health, and treating a cow like she's actually a cow, uh, and making sure that we follow the natural desires of the animals we're working with, and also the soils we're working with. So so much of it is our system that actually makes for this health, so we don't use those other things. It's I went back to World Dairy Expo, which is this huge dairy show in Wisconsin every year, and it's like acres and acres and acres of everything, all the new fancy stuff to take a look at. And I was in this one big venue where they had all these new products, and I went down the one aisle and I said, well, I can't use that, and I can't use that, and I can't use that, and can't use that, because it was all the thou shalt not products on that aisle. And I went around and went down the next aisle, and I said, "Well, I don't need that because I can't use that, and I don't need that because I can't use that." So the one aisle was all the stuff that would make problems that you needed to fix for on the other aisle. So, um, so much of farming is about that now, where it's okay. Our management drives the need for all these increased inputs, and that's the problem we're facing. So the farmer the farmer is using these products that cost money to then have to use these other products that cost money, and in the end of the day, that's whittling down the profit margin. So what do? You get bigger, right? You get bigger, 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 bigger to try and outrun that thing, and that's not. I don't want to do that. That's not my model.
Yeah. And I get a sense, that farmers really care about the animals that they're taking care of, and something that I heard you say in an interview was something really that kind of struck me. Like, you really are in tune with your cattle. You even said something about tapping into cow psychology. So how does that? And it had to
Well,
do with grazing. How does
yeah, yeah.
tell
Well,
tell us about that?
you just watch and see. A cow, like I say, a cow wants to do what a cow wants to do, right? Uh, my grazing's grass wants to do what grass wants to do. Forages want to do what forages want to do. They all want to reproduce and go reproductive. And a cow wants to do what a cow wants to do, which is go around and pick the nicest little morsels she can find anywhere she wants. Uh, but I've got to marry these two systems together for the benefit of both of them, and for me to be able to stay in business. So what we have to do is we have to set up paddocks for the cows to graze. Well, cows like a certain shape. They don't. The cow psychology is, you make it long and narrow, and they think they have a raceway, and they walk it back and forth, killing all the grass, stomping it down, compacting the soil, and they're not happy. They're not happy in that space. You need to make sure the space you're putting them in, they're happy in there. So using cow psychology on the space of how you set that up, just how you walk around and work around your cows. A cow knows that they are prey. They know they're not a predator, right? They know where they're at on the food scale, on that whole thing. And so when I come up to a cow, I don't look her in the eyes. That's a classic predator move. So, you come up to a cow, you look away from her. You don't look her in the eyes because, you don't make your cows nervous that way. So when we're working around cows in the barn, especially when you're in close contact with them, you just learn how to move around a cow, knowing what her psychology is, knowing what frightens her, what she likes. And so I really have to be in tune with how cows act, what they're going to do. I mean, just for instance, we're grazing our heifers up at our farm up here, and I brought the first cow calf pair up here, and they got out of their spot that I put them in kind of a temporary little wire. The two calves weren't used to it. They knocked it over and came running up to see the rest of the herd, which was no big deal. But I put them in the field next to them, which was a big mistake, because then they wanted to go. The whole rest of the herd wanted to go and hang out over there by that was cow psychology number one. I shouldn't have put them there. I should have never put those two cows there, because then the heifers came up in the rain and mucked up a corner of the field. They wouldn't have done that if the cow and the two calves weren't there. I should have run them all the way back down the barn. So I knew that, and yet I still didn't do it right. But we got them back down where they needed to be, and quit that silliness. But so you see what cows do and what they want to do and what they will do. And after a while, you kind of get used to what that pattern is, and you need to use it in to your management effect. And so that's just, so much of what we do on our farm is just biofeedback. You take a look at what how something acts, and if it acts how it is what you want it to do, keep doing it. And if not, don't do that again. Just quit doing that. Um, so much of that is what we focus on.
Wow. Yeah. Well, lesson learned.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a lot of lessons. You learn lessons every day. It turns out.
Yeah, and then you don't get experience until shortly after yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Isn't
until
that the
after.
problem right there, huh? Isn't that the problem? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lifelong problem right there. By the time you get smart, you're ready to go on the ground.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so you weren't always organic, right? Did you
Yeah. No,
farm
we started.
conventionally before switching over?
Yeah, we started as conventional dairy farmers, so that's what I grew up with. Now, I do like to tell people that my grandfather, he was a organic dairy farmer. He just didn't know that's what it was called, and he didn't get paid differently for it because back in the day when my grandfather dairy farmed, there were no antibiotics. It was before antibiotics. There weren't pesticides. That was before World War II. Or shortly thereafter. Pesticides and herbicides really didn't come into effect till after the World Wars because they were developed by the military, and then they were used in farming after the military was done using them as war munitions, and so those things didn't come around till later. So basically, all farmers were organic farmers before a certain point in our country. And then the green revolution, as they called it, came into effect, which is a misnomer in itself. The green revolution, which has managed to pollute our waterways and kill the Gulf Coast and all that stuff. That's an interesting thing to call it. Um, and so that came into effect, and then the backlash came onto that when consumers said, wait, I really don't want pesticides involved in the production of my food, and I don't want antibiotics part of the production of my food. And so we got that blowback. That really came to pass in dairy farming uh, when Monsanto came up with BST. And BST is a hormone that you can inject into your cows every 10 days, and it makes them produce like 30% more milk. And lots of consumers said they really didn't want that. There was a big battle line drawn at that part. Some people didn't know it was being used in their dairy products. Um, but once there was some awareness of that, sector of the population said, "Wait, wait, wait! I don't want that. Don't produce that." So that happened in my career during my career. So 31 years ago, when we started our own farm, that wasn't a thing. About 4 years into my career, which would have been about 27 years ago, BST came out. And I just didn't want to. You had to inject it into the tail head of the cow every 10 to 12 days. And I thought, boy, that really seems stupid to me. I don't want to be like a drug dealer on my cows, sitting there hopping them up every 10 to 12 days with this stuff to get more milk out of them. So I'd get less lifespan out of them. So, just none of it made a lot of sense. Monsanto was the one who came out with that product, and they got a lot of bad publicity at that point about that. But we decided we didn't want to use it. I didn't want to use that, and so right about that time, the organic milk market really kind of exploded, and then Organic Valley, the CEO, showed up at my doorstep and asked if we'd consider switching over organic milk production, and I didn't do it right away. Um, it took me 3 years because I was a little, we're early in our farm. I had a lot of debt. I didn't want to stick my neck out too far. The organic thing was really kind of just taking off, and I wasn't terribly sure, and part of it was my gray matter holding me back. So a lot of times, that's what holds me back is my little gray cells in my brain. Uh, being worried about stuff, and not knowing how. The funny part was, I look back at what the reason why I decided I didn't want to switch right then is because we fed a lot of grain to our cows at that time, even though we grazed our cows, to keep the production level up. And I thought, it's too hard to find organic grain. How am I going to find enough organic grain to keep this thing going? And then I made the switch over to organic, and all of a sudden I quit feeding as much grain right away. I did. So it became not an issue because I started feeding less and less and less. And in fact, we switched over 4 or 5 years ago now to no grain at all. So we feed our cows no grain. So we're grass dairy. We produce grass milk now. It's from the cows that eat grass. Some people think, if you go to a trade show and you have the grass milk that we're sampling, some people think that it's actually made from grass itself, not from cows, but it's just from cows that eat only grass. So
Yeah, like the I don't know, some of those, meat the branding, they've got some pretty creative names for that not meat.
yeah,
Is it
yeah,
is
yeah.
it certain types of grass? Is it a certain type of grass, or do you have a mixture of
Well,
materials of grasses that the cattle graze on?
yeah, and grass milk. It's only called grass milk because the consumers understand that a little bit better than forage milk, right? So any green forages that the cows will eat are considered, grass for this purpose. So we feed. I have 12 to 18 different species of things growing out in my pastures because I need to provide a real balanced diet for the cows. So we've got several different types of grasses in each field. Um, Perennial ryegrass, orchard grass, brome grasses, some festiloliums. So we bring a lot of different grasses in, but we also bring different clovers in. So white clover and red clover, little alfalfa at times, another legume. Uh, we also bring in chicory and plantain, which are an herb type of a plant. I'm always looking for different things that the cows want to eat, will eat, because um, that gives the cows a real balanced diet. As they're taking mouthfuls of feed, they're getting this mix, right? And it'd be like if you ate only potatoes your whole life. The cows, and why that's important is back to the microbes in the cow, because as that feed breaks down in the stomach, that gives those microbes, because each plant has a different relationship with different microbes in the soil, and each plant has a different uh, chemical makeup. What it's made up of. It brings different nutrients to that cow, different vitamins, different minerals, and so each plant has a different profile, and so that's providing a whole mixed diet for those microbes in the gut that need a whole mix of nutrients too. So it's that interplay. That what I've really found in my whole career is monoculture's bad, and I could break it down to monoculture's bad, polyculture's good. That's really what we've discovered.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now we're starting to dabble in our realm, the plants and the soil and the microbes. So we you grow different types of plants. Now let's jump into microbes because that's come up quite a bit.
Yeah,
How are you focusing on soil health and tying that into the system? Because I get a sense that you're really dialed into this is an entire system, starting from the microbes in the soil all the way to that end product, the milk and the butterfat and all the products that the cow's producing.
yeah. So I got to really look at what the microbes want. What do they need to really flourish in the soil? And they need they need air. They need air, they need moisture, they need food, right? And so you provide all those things, they're going to be happy. So some things we've done to make them happier is we've increased our rotation. So our cows are rotationally grazed. So and that just means they're on one spot for a short period of time and then moved on. And then, so they move on to different pieces of grass. Our milk cows, every 12 hours, they get a fresh spot of grass. And we don't let the cows come back and regraze where they've been, because after 3 days, they start to repick growth on the new stuff that slows that growth way down. So back in the day, when we fed a lot of grain, we were on a short rotation where every 12 days the cows came back to the same piece of ground to graze. And that's just horrible for microbes in the soil. Reason is because the cows come back and they just keep picking stuff shorter and shorter and shorter, picking the stuff they really like. And so that forage never gets a chance to really grow tall or provide shade. If you think about it, microbes don't like to be hot any more than anything else does. So if I let the grass grow a little taller, a little longer, that provides shade, keeps more moisture in the soil. That's another thing the microbes need is moisture. So it helps keep moisture in the soil, helps keep the soil cooler for the microbes in the summertime. And it also keeps from having compaction, because those plants that are healthier put down bigger roots. They have more roots down in the ground, which is more place for interaction for those microbes, because the microbes have this intimate interaction with the plants. Between mycorrhizal fungi going on there, and the mycorrhizal fungi have relationships with the bacteria, and the bacteria have relationships directly with the roots of the system. The plants are putting out sugars. About 30% or better is put out of the plant. What the plant produces is actually put back into the ground for the microbes that are in the ground that help break down minerals for the plants to consume. The mycorrhizal fungi actually are embedded into the roots of the plant, and these long mycorrhizae that run forever through our soils, they actually not only mine nutrients for the plant, but during drought time, they'll mine water for the plant. So, having those microbes in the soil really healthy, and what I can do is I can provide shelter, I can provide moisture, I can provide airspace in there. So different plants provide, and different plants come and they go. Like I said, I talked about chicory that we plant in our stands. Well, chicory, if you ever try to dig up a chicory, it has about a 4-foot taproot. Well, chicory will be there in a stand, and in a pasture stand, it doesn't have a long lifespan, maybe 2 or 3 years. But what it leaves behind when it dies is this big taproot that's down in the soil. That's now food for the microbes, but it's also airspace for the microbes. So everything we can do to add things in, and then we can go in with a no-till drill every so often and just drill in a little bit more seed of the plants that I want to help keep that compaction from happening. So we have the ability just to try and make an environment that keeps those microbes at their highest level of health. You got something for me?
I'm going to jump in there for a second, John, just to verify what John has been working on for all these years. We have a little machine that we have been using called a microbiometer, and I ran probably a couple hundred tests last year, from very denuded hazelnut orchards through seed production fields, and I pulled tests at Bansen Farms, and it was no surprise to John, but an average test would show up, in a commercial field in the 300s, maybe 250 and lower. And I pulled tests for John at John's farm in a couple different places, and he was at 900, and the fungal to bacterial ratio, it was 1 to 1. So whatever John is doing, Bansens are doing to build biology has been working. And that's no surprise to you, John.
Well, no, it's nice to see the numbers. It's nice to see the actual numbers that prove that. But I think I've been seeing the proof in cow health and milk production and plant production and those things. So it's one of those things. I don't do a really great job of metering how much health this system brings in, but I see it. I see it on a daily basis. So and I can see what's going on other farmers' fields around here. And what they need to do to get growth out of their fields. They have to put all these big inputs on out there, and then they go through and they spray. And the reasoning a lot of times is because they're out there spraying fungicides on the ground all the time to kill these allegedly bad fungi. Well, it's killing all the fungi, and the mycorrhizal fungi are one of the most important things we have going for us in the soil. So and that's, I need to keep those things, because if I have those things working for me, I don't need all those fixes that cost a bunch of money. Plus I get to plug into a marketplace that consumers are looking for, that organic marketplace. And so it just it's a system that's really worked for us. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think it's so important that we're focusing on the microbiology, and hopefully listeners that don't understand how important that those beneficial species are, starting with from, say, cattle, for example, to even our health, and how they tie into the system. Because so many people think, they hear bacteria or fungi and they automatically think it's bad, and, oh, I got to kill everything and I got to be sterile. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The synergistic effect for mycorrhizae, for example, the bacteria, the plants. We were going to have a guest on uh, next week, if things go according to plan, that studies rhizophagy and ties into plants harvesting microbes like we harvest the plants. So they're integral to the system. You've said it time and time again throughout our discussion on how important that those microbes are to not only the plant health, but to your cattle's health, which is going to be translate into healthy products, which then we consume, and even the plants that we consume. Um, do you supplement with any biology? Are you putting anything into the system, or are you relying on natural species to flourish?
We have not really worked on putting stuff into the system, just because I think it's more important to use some of those aids, some of those things into the system if your system is a little downgraded, because lots of them will have been lost. They won't be there. Um, I spent 30 years. So even before I was organic, I wasn't using any sprays on our farm. That was not anything I wanted to do. So we're 31 years since anything has been sprayed at all. The owner before me was growing corn, so I'm sure he was spraying that for pests and things like that as he was growing corn to feed his cows. Uh, but we haven't. And so, I saw after we took over the farm and started grazing and started doing what we were, um, we've seen it get stronger and stronger and stronger. So I know we're building that system, and that we probably would have benefited greatly for to use some products that might have ramped that system up faster on the front end back in the day, back 30 years ago. But this wasn't even much on the radar of farming at that point. So we just built it. We did it the Field of Dreams way: build it and they will come. So we built it and they've come, and sticking with it. Now we have a really flourishing, healthy microbial system. A lot of it is, a lot of farmers fear, giving up their band-aids, their fungicides and those things, their insecticides, and and frankly, rightfully so, for how degraded their soils are. If you don't have the friendly stuff, so the friendly stuff, the good microbes, the good bacteria, the good fungi we have, they can handle any of these bad guys that show up. It's when you have a system that's devoid of the good guys, the bad guys show up and they do some damage. Especially in a monoculture type of a situation. So, anytime you can add in diversity, it'd be like having a diverse ground cover underneath an orchard. That's going to give you a lot of different benefits. Beneficial insects are going to be drawn to it, and all those kind of things. So there's a lot of ways that we can biologically crack that nut if we're thinking, and bringing in more biology to our systems.
I forgot to ask earlier, how many head of cattle do you have?
We have about 175 milk cows, somewhere around there, and we used to have almost 175 young stock going behind those, but we've kind of switched gears and we don't raise quite as many young stock, because the market has changed, and we used to sell a lot of cows for other people to milk back in the day when that market was really good, and we used to be able to raise a calf fairly reasonably, and sell them for a profit. And now those days are gone. Some things have changed. In the industry, they came up with sex semen. So now you can buy semen from bulls that are primarily just female semen. And so you're gonna get 92, 94% of calves are going to be heifers, which means everybody has plenty enough heifers. So that market went away for me, and so now we just we try and keep it into balance of what we need. So we have about maybe 85 young stock now behind, maybe a few more than that. We don't need that many. We need to keep figuring out how to get less. But so we're breeding to some beef bulls, because then people want to buy these beef cross calves, and so we were able to sell those off, basically effectively keeping us from having to raise more calves, because we don't want beef cows. That's not the job. That's not our game. Our game is dairy cows. So we keep the dairy calves, and the beef calves go away.
Gotcha. Then to
So,
tie that back into the grazing, it's 175 or so. You said how many acres of grazable land then does that require, and how much are they grazing per day? I know you said you have paddocks and they're feeding
yeah.
so much of the ground per day. How does that play
Yeah.
out?
So in a dairy herd, some of the cows are going to be milking, and some of the cows are going to be dry cows. And a
Gotcha.
dry cow is a cow that's waiting to have a calf, so they get about 2 months off from the time they calve, or 2 months off from the time they're going to calve. So they'll be heavy pregnant. When they're 7 months pregnant, we quit milking them for 2 months. They get their vacation,
That's
and
maternity leave.
it's maternity leave. Yes, it is 2 months of maternity leave, and so at any one time we're milking about 150 cows. So at any one time we have about 150, uh, roughly, going through the parlor, and those 150 graze on 100 and let's see, we got about 110 acres of grazing ground. Um, and it's irrigated grazing ground. That's why we can get by with more than one cow per acre, is because we've got really high production ground. And a lot of the reasons why we can have that number of cows on that number of acres is because we built this biology into our ground, and the ground is really productive, and we can really grow a lot of grass. And so the cows are on about an acre and a quarter to an acre and a half per feeding, and so that gives us roughly 68 paddocks, I think it is, and we can divide. So we've got our system of fencing is we have a perimeter fence, and then we have uh, poly wire, which is a plastic wire with stainless steel threads in it to conduct the electricity. And we can roll that out, and we can roll it out at any pattern. So depending on the time of the year and the grass growth, we can make the pieces bigger or littler how we see fit. So that's part of my job has always been take a look at the fields. What are they doing? What's the weather pattern doing? Where do we put them? How do we put them? That's the art of what we do on a grazing farm is that moving cows around. I always call it this time of the year is the dance. So in the springtime you do the dance. You're dancing around the farm, you're dancing the cows in and out of the barn. So yesterday about 1.1 inches of rain. And so, we danced the cows out in the morning, filled their bellies full of feed, because a cow that's hungry, she's going to go out and eat. Even if it's raining sideways, she'll be out there grazing. As soon as her stomach is full, she's looking not to be in the rain like that. And so she's going to come, and if you have a whole herd of 150 of them, they're all going to come to a corner and they're going to destroy it. So our job this time of the year is don't let the plants get destroyed. So we'll let the cows back up to the barn where they're much happier to be under cover for a little bit. And then we milk them in the afternoon, and then they go right back out to graze again and fill their stomachs back up, because that's what's for dinner, as they'd say on our farm. It's out there, but they'll go out. They're happy to go out and fill up. But if it's really inclement weather, they're happy to come back in again. So we dance them this time of the year, and then once we get past this really wet, crummy time, which is usually done by this time by about 3 weeks. I mean, we're a little late getting rid of this stuff. And, once we get into that normal summertime pattern, we get into more rotation where it's more set. I can almost tell you which fields how much every time. It's just very set. This time of the year, we gotta be nimble. We gotta change around. We gotta move them to a field that's a little drier, a little better drainage. Don't go into that field right by the barn. The worst part about our farm is the wettest piece of ground we have is right outside the barn door. So we can't even utilize that. We got to walk the cows further in the really wet weather because we can't go out on that really wet field.
Are there any nutrients in the soil or any of the elements that affect dairy production or the health? Is there something that if it gets a little bit too high or too low, the cows are either unhappy or the yield goes down or the quality is impacted? Anything like that?
Anything that's out of balance, anything at all that's really out of balance causes problems. So, we really need a balance of all those nutrients. And so, I do add on limestone onto our fields every now and again, because I need to, in this rainy, heavy rain uh, uh, pattern we get here, that will eventually take your calcium out of your soils. So I add in some calcium because that's really a driver of this biological system we have. So I have to watch that. So I do add in some lime from time to time. But it's just a matter of not over applying anything anywhere, and just keeping everything in stasis. So, yeah, you don't want too high of potassium levels. Will really be bad for cows' health. So you
How
can't have
so?
It causes a lot of metabolic problems, especially around calving time. And so having too high of potassium levels can actually, it throws off that potassium calcium uh, 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 balance in the cow. Sodium, those are all in balance in the cow. You throw that off by adding one too high, and it causes you grief, and that causes a lot of metabolic problems in cows as they calve if that potassium's too high. And say potassium, once you put it into the soil, is pretty stable there, and cow manure is fairly high in potassium. So if you're back in the day, a lot of farms, when they confined their cows, then had, when you confine a cow, she's in the barn, right? And all of her nutrients are in wherever you're collecting the nutrients, whether it's a lagoon or a pile or whatever it is. Well, it turns out a lot of farmers felt the easiest way to make it go away was the closest field you had to the barn, right? And so those fields would be super high in potassium, which would cause metabolic problems if you fed cows that feed at too high of a ratio. And so sometimes they would have all the manure going really close to the barn, and then they'd have their dry cows out grazing that stuff, and then you'd have problems, or they'd harvest that and feed it to their dry cows that were on maternity leave, and then you have a lot of metabolic problems in your cows. So my job is to make sure we don't do any of that silliness, and so we spread everything. We kind of use a teaspoon to spread, not kind of figuratively, not actually, but we spread our nutrients that we store from wintertime all over the farm evenly, so we don't get into those kind of problems.
Okay.
So yeah.
Is that what
Now,
happens with most of the cow manure that's produced? Is that reintroduced as feed for your fields?
Yeah, it's all used. So we have, so in the winter time we store our nutrients in the cow manure is stored in a lagoon, and so in the summertime our job is to empty that lagoon out, and we have the system we've built is kind of a unique one too. We poured cement on the bottom of our lagoon so we can drive down and clean out the solids out of the lagoon. But first, we suck the liquids out, kind of like a big snow cone kind of a deal there. So we suck all the liquids out, and those get placed onto the through a irrigation system through all of our grazing and harvesting lands, except for some hill ground we have up on the other place that we can't reach with our liquid manure. So we take all the solids and take those up to those fields where we've harvested the previous springtime. So we harvest in the springtime for wintertime feed, but then we take that manure that's produced from that wintertime feed and put it right back on those fields that we've harvested that feed off of. So it's I don't know if you know the story of Sisyphus, who had to roll the rock uphill all the
Hmm.
time. That was Greek mythology, I think, and Sisyphus was destined to have to roll the rock uphill all the time. Well, we're kind of Sisyphus, but with cow manure, because we have to roll it back up the hill. We bring it down, we bring the feed down the hill, and then we roll the manure back up the hill. That's what we do. That's our job. So, but we just need to make sure that nutrient cycling is really what we're all about. So, a benefit to having animals uh, as part of the farm is really that it's really being able to cycle those nutrients through the animal back to the ground, back to the animal, back to the ground. We're able to just keep that pattern going, and that again, if you don't do that, if you don't replace those nutrients where you've taken them off from, you're going to weaken that microbial uh, uh, family that's working for you, and we need to make sure they got something to eat down in there so they can do their work.
so with manure in spring and temperatures are going up and being organic, I think of flies. What do you do you have certain things that you do for
I,
flies that
I think of flies a lot too. So back in the day, we were when we're conventional. The conventional world uses pesticides to spray on the cows to keep the flies off, right? And there's a product that you spray on and it kills the flies for 30 days on a cow. Something that's so toxic that it goes on a cow and kills them for 30 days. You do the math, that can't be good.
That does
Well,
not sound good.
doesn't sound good. And I briefly used them when I was not an organic farmer, briefly used them and realized, I did not want to do that because there's two things. When you would go to apply the stuff, the farmers, lock the cows in these headlocks because the cows don't exactly like being sprayed. And so you lock them in the headlocks, and then you went behind each cow and you sprayed down her back with this. You had a backpack spray and you sprayed down her back. Well, became pretty apparent the most exposure to any animal on the farm was me because I was the one spraying every cow, getting drift back from all that. Right, so all of a sudden I'm enemy number one on that deal. That didn't make me feel so good. And then you let the cows out of lock stalls, and the first thing they do is they turn around and lick themselves. So now they're licking some of this product and it's going in their bloodstream. None of that seemed right with me. So we actually tackled this problem by doing several things. One thing is keeping cows really clean, keeping the area where they're at clean, keeping manure. Flies breed in manure. So if you have and they breed in rotting material around the farm. So you keep everything, keep your all the stuff cleaned up, spread on the fields. If it's spread out in the fields, it comes in contact with sunlight, it dries it out. It's not a place for flies. They don't want to breed in that anymore. They need moisture, and that's what they want. They need rotting material, moisture, manure. And so we clean the calf. The calf areas would be cleaned out once a week to keep from flies breeding, because a lot of flies came from the calf area. They still do on any dairy farm. So we clean that out to keep that fly cycle down. And any place where any cow manure was scraped out from when the cows were standing milking, we clean that out once a week and get that spread out. But we also put up swallow boxes, bird boxes, hundreds of them for swallows. So the swallows will help us out with the fly problem, right? And then there's the last fly that caused problems that spends its whole life cycle on the cow. It's called the horn fly, and it's this tiny little fly, and there'll be hundreds on each cow, sometimes thousands on each cow. And they spend their whole life cycle on the cow, and they only jump off to lay eggs and manure out in the field. Well, I can't exactly keep that cleaned up. The way we do help on that process is having the cows eating really high quality forage, which makes their manure high quality, which means other insects want to break it down faster, which means there's less habitat for those flies to breed and do all they want to, but there's still plenty of them around. So we bought a fly vacuum, and we walk the cows through it twice a day, and it blows air on their belly and sucks in a big old on the other side there's a big vacuum, and it sucks it up in there, and then there's also a vacuum up by their neck, and they walk through like these strips of plastic that knocks the flies off, and they go up there, and all these flies go up into a chamber where they don't come out. They go out to this little screen porch and never figure out how to get back out, and they die an ugly death in my vacuum. And
and
I love it.
deservedly so.
Mechanical
yeah,
control for insecticide. I love it.
yeah, yeah, and the cows come up to the barn. The cows come up for pasture twice a day. So every time the cows come up, they walk through the fly vacuum. fly vacuum takes, and so you keep ahead of that cycle because flies, flies breed fast when they breed, and so to be able to just mechanically suck those, everybody who's mechanically sucked off and in that fly vacuum is not going to reproduce. So you lower that number of fly levels to where we might have tens on the cow instead of hundreds on the cow, and those flies really cause a lot of discomfort for the cows because they feed off of their blood. They sit there and bite them all day. And so that makes cows unhappy. Cow psychology. They start getting attacked by something, they all group up. They don't graze, they group up. They overcompact the soil where they group up at. They're unhappy. They don't milk as well. They don't graze as well. So we need to make sure we have controls of those things.
Yeah, that's great. I was really curious about the swallows, and the reason why I asked, I saw a video that you did, and I saw the swallow boxes, and I thought, oh wow, that's really neat. How you
Yeah.
incorporate mechanical, again, biological, using natural predators to harvest the flies. I thought that was just really neat how you did
Yeah,
that.
it's like any of these things. There's got to be a multi-prong approach in any of these problems we see. And it's not just one thing. You gotta bring in all sorts of aids and for the biological part of controlling pests in the field. That's just having multiple aids out there. The multiple aids I have out there are all coming free because I'm providing healthy habitat for them. So anytime I can have things working for me, and we're back to soil health and cow health on that,
Yep,
and back in the whole system we go. So it's all tied together there.
absolutely. And we do want to be respectful of your time, but I do have a couple of questions that I want to end to kind of wrap these things up. But I do want to make sure that Bill, Josh, has anything come up for you while we've been talking that you want to ask John?
No, I think we pretty much covered all my questions. Yeah.
Bill, how about you, bud?
I have hundreds more questions,
Yeah, me too.
but we really don't have time. I'm looking at the clock too.
Yeah, and
John,
I,
this
I
is
can
this is fascinating. It really is, and I've heard the story before.
I can blather on quite well. Thank you very much. It's my superpower.
Well,
I'm
we
just blown
that's why we
away
want
at
good guests, the ones with the gift of gab. Otherwise, this would be pretty boring.
I'm just blown away at all the similarities between the organic, how you face everything with organics, the same exact way we do in the industries I've dealt with. It's almost identical from the ground up. It's very interesting. I'm very unexperienced when it comes to cow farming and farming in general. I'm more of an
Yeah.
indoor gardener.
All right. All right.
So, a couple of
I'm
follow. Go
gonna
ahead,
I'm
Bill.
gonna make one comment, Jon, and was interesting to me overall listening to John describe his system, the changes they've made, the things they've done, things that work. It sounds to me, Mr. Bansen, that you spend as much time managing the care of your forage as you do managing the care of your livestock.
Oh,
Would you agree with that?
no, I'm a forage grower. We harvest forage. The milk cows are a way to harvest that forage and turn it in to income to run our farm. But no two ways about it. Our first and foremost job is to grow forage, and and you have either in the beef industry. I just heard a guy talking. He said you either have cattlemen or you have grazers, and the grazers make the best cattlemen because they're watching the cows for how some people just focus too much on the cow end of things. They're all about cow production. Well, if I'm just about cow production, per cow production, I'm taking my eyeball off of what's really driving our system, you know, biologically and financially. So that's I got to look at it through that lens. And as I drill down, became more of a forage, really managing of the forage and working the forage end. That drove me into the microbe end, so, it's one begets the next begets the next. So, you take it to the level. So really, I'm a microbe and sun farmer, not not so much a forage farmer, but the forage is it's what's always driven our system. Grazing has been why we're still in business. It really is. And so, I was driven to get better at that, which meant I focused more on how to make that healthier and happier. And the way to make that healthier and happier is to have your soils happier and healthier, right? So one doesn't get better without the other getting better, and that drives the whole system. I'm looking for not ultimate production out of my milk cows. I'm looking for optimum with how I'm managing my farm. And that's what we really look at. And how do you get there? You get there by the right species of plants, the right microbial population working for you in the soils, keeping those guys happy and healthy. So that's really where, that was the transition. So so I was reading things from New Zealand about rotationally grazing and how you should slow down your rotation. I'm like, well, I only have so many acres and I got so many cows. How do I slow it down? How do you slow down the rotation? I was having a hard time with the old graze cells figuring out, the way you slow it down is you slow it down, right? You just make littler pieces and I didn't have we'd been rotating faster, so I saw that we couldn't produce enough forage, so I was feeding more grain to make up for not having as much forage. What I was getting in the way of myself was, if I slowed down, I would make so much more forage because there'd be so much more production off our land if we rotated slower, gave the pieces smaller pieces of grass each time, and taking a lot longer to get back to it. That was the aha moment, but that drove me into thinking about the microbes and what was going on in the soil, because then that was really the aha moment. That's how it got so much stronger. That's why I'm producing so much more forage by slowing the rotation down, is because I'm keeping all those guys really happy down there. And if they're happy, I'm happy.
That's great. Love it. The whole system all tied together. Love the mindset. You're a grazer focusing on soil, forage, and that just ends up with happy cows and great
There you
milk and butter fat. And so that
go.
being said, I want to tie this back to the consumer, right? Because
All right.
people have to
You bet.
buy your product. Is there something you want consumers to know, either about dairy farming or any like a myth that needs to be that you want to bust? Something that what should consumers know, or is
I think consumers just need to know that they should get intelligent about how their food's produced. That they need to really look into how their food's produced, and that will drive them to better choices in the marketplace. We're fortunate enough to agree to join forces with Organic Valley 21 years ago, and it was the best decision we ever made in our life. And fortunately, Organic Valley came at this with this thought process that they were going to set the price to the consumer so the farmer was able to make a living, right? They were going to do that, and the whole premise was they were going to set the price so the farmer had could make a living off of it and keep doing this organic system. And if the consumers came along with it, great. If not, we're in trouble, right? It turned out consumers came along with it because there was enough consumers really looking for something different at that point. And so that's been really just a blessing in our life, is that consumers saw that was something worth paying for differently. And so Organic Valley took it on faith that consumers would come with them, uh, and hey, it happened. So you know, my feedback would be for consumers to really focus on how their food's produced, get smart about how their food's produced, because it does affect their health. Whether they want to admit it or not, what they put in their bodies is really affecting their health. Um, and then I'd like to thank them if they're supporting us, because that's been a great deal. This is going to be a little shout out for our actual milk. So Organic Valley actually has a relationship with Nancy's Yogurt down Springfield Creamery. Makes Nancy's Yogurt, and Nancy's Yogurt has a grass milk yogurt, and that grass milk yogurt is coming directly off our farm. So if you want to taste Double J Jersey's milk, it is made with our milk. And the Kesey family at Springfield Creamery are some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life, and they make some phenomenal yogurt. And my personal favorite is the grass milk vanilla. You'll never eat anything else if you put that in your mouth. It's really good.
Is that only regional, or can that be found nationwide?
I don't know if it's Nancy's does move product nationwide. I don't know if their grass milk is nationwide. I probably have to look up on that, but it's good stuff.
Because I'm
Give it a
going
try.
to. And if not, Bill or Josh, you better have some ready for me when I get to Oregon next time.
Yeah, yeah. Go to the food co-op in Corvallis. You'll guarantee get it there. Marketed Choice has it down there. It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
I got to jump in for just a minute because John, I came from conventional farming, and John made this transition with Organic Valley, and he would bring me, because we used to coach youth sports together, right? Our girls played softball, and we saw each other all the time. And he would bring me these little coupons, and this is when Organic Valley was just getting rolling, right? Because I'd price the milk in the store, and I'd say that's ridiculous. I'm not doing that. I've got to pay the bills. I've got 4 kids of my own. I can't buy that kind of milk. But we started doing that and used his little coupons that he'd bring me. Thank you again for those, John. But we were hooked. We never went back. We only buy Organic Valley products now, and that's just the way it is because it's better. It's just better, and I didn't believe it, right? But
Yeah,
I'm a
well,
believer.
hey,
Yeah.
we got a lot of parents hooked back in the day when our kids were in sports. I'd have my coupons and pass them out, and I don't know how many parents told me, "Thanks a lot. Now you got me hooked. I can't go back." It was, yeah,
Isn't that how the drug dealers get started, right?
Yes,
The
I think
first the
that's the
first
way it
shot's free.
happened.
Yeah.
Only this is the opposite way. This is the good way, right?
Hey, you want some yogurt?
That's right.
Grass yogurt.
I'm going to tell you, I shop down at the food co-op in Corvallis, and I always have some Organic Valley coupons in my wallet, and I creep on people when they're shopping. And if they have one of our products, I go up and hit them with our coupon, thank them. And it's the most fun. My wife sometimes gets annoyed with me, but it's the most fun I have when I'm shopping.
Well, you got to make shopping fun because shopping's not always fun. So yeah.
Yeah.
Slip a little coupon in their cart when they're not looking.
That's right. Well, it actually gives me a chance to tell them, hey, this stuff's produced locally. And that's kind of the cool part about our cooperative is it's a nationwide cooperative, but we have farmers all over the country, and so the milk gets kept locally. Even though if you look on the carton for Organic Valley, it says Lafarge, Wisconsin. It's not produced in Lafarge, Wisconsin. It's produced out here. It's a national co-op, so they have to put that address on it. So
Gotcha. And that also ties into your educational emphasis when you're at the store with your
right,
coupons. That's part of the educational outreach. It's one small segment, but you can't emphasize that enough. The importance of an educated consumer
yeah,
and really your diet. People are amazed. I've seen it time and time again, myself included. Some very subtle changes over time lead to big results, and people really need to, if anything, the whole pandemic should have been to re-emphasize the importance of diet. How often did you hear, if you were listening to the right people, to help ward off COVID, exercise, diet, make sure you have vitamin D, make sure where do you get vitamin D? You can,
Yeah.
sunshine, but obviously, other things. But a big part of that is diet and exercise. Diet, diet, diet. Can't be
Right.
eating sugar all the time.
It is really, 95% of my cows' health is their diet. That's why I can do what I can do, and not have to have a bunch of crutches, antibiotics and hormones to give my cows, um, is because of their diet, and that plays on humans so well too, and yeah, I need to back off on my chocolate consumption a little because it turns out there's sugar in chocolate a little bit. But hey, I'm working on it. I'm working to get better.
I hear you. I hear you. We all battle it. Yeah. Well, good. Well, John, was there anything that you thought of that maybe we should have asked or you'd like us to ask before you got to go?
I think we covered about a whole bunch of stuff, but there's always more. There's always more. Your listeners probably wouldn't stay on the podcast for another 20 hours. So there you go.
Well, maybe we'll have you back. This has been a lot of fun. I look forward to meeting you up in Oregon when I come up to see the crew at BioAg, and would like to meet you face to face. I'd love to be doing this face to face, but it's not going to work out that way because I live here in Arizona. But we do
Yeah, yeah.
thank you very much for your time. Thank you for sharing your journey through your farming and practices, and taking care of those wonderful cows, making wonderful product and soil, microbiology, everything. Thank you.
Well, come on by. I'll show you. We got new projects going on all over the farm, planting trees all over the place. So if you come on up from Arizona, we'll give you the grand tour and have a little picnic at the party barn. How about that?
That sounds great. Deal.
All right.
Very cool.
All right. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you,
Well, thanks,
John.
guys.
Take care.
Take care.
All right.
Okay, guys. I thought that was a pretty cool segment. And this is what we're going to call, at least for now, I want to call this segment the afterthought. What came
Sounds good.
What came up for you guys? I mean, this was a really good conversation. I thought I learned a lot about dairy farming that I didn't know before.
Well, what I was most intrigued about was his transition from traditional to organic was about the same as just about everyone who I know from my industry who's transitioned that way. The same. It was out of a need for convenience, or and it ended up being the thing to do because it was the only way. You made that decision 10 years ago, and it's the only reason you're still surviving today. Those are, all my friends that are still, really successful out there farming, or, they transition to, away from traditional farming and into organics, and they're the ones winning the game right now. They're not struggling at all. Whereas all my friends that stuck with what they were doing for the last 15 years, they're having a lot of harder time than everybody else, or, same that everyone else is in right now. It's not easy out there, especially in the farming world.
Yeah, the thing that really jumped out to me with John is, he began the talk about, Johann, you asked him about what is organic. And John said, it is a set of thou shall nots and a set of thou shalts, right? So what is it, what it's not? I think the reason why J&J Jerseys has been successful and continues today is because John didn't focus on the thou shalt nots. I think there are organic transitions that happen poorly because that's the focus.
Mm-hmm.
But John knows that the biology drives his system,
Mm-hmm.
and it starts in the soil, and that biology is mirrored in the cow rumen, and you manage them and you focus on them, and they're the priority, and it works.
That's a great point, because that ties right into educated consumer,
Mm-hmm.
right? The AC technician that was over this morning, when I said organic dairy farmer, he immediately focused on the thou shalt nots. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. I like that, John's point, because those that listen to this, and we can now say, but you can do this, you can do that. And those cans outweigh the cannots, and the whole biology issue just ties in. If that doesn't hit it home, all right, the importance of biology to a biological system, including your own. Here you have an animal, firsthand experience. This is the benefit of having healthy forage that's rich in microbial life. That microbial life is important to that healthy food, right? Educating the consumer. And we covered a lot of really valuable information. So I'm kind of glad we didn't spend a whole time or a lot of time on, so what about the organic process, certification, registration, all of these how to's? You can find that kind of stuff online. And maybe we have them back. Maybe we talk about organic certification and that transition and the regulations that go into it. But
Mm-hmm.
we really kept it, again, biology focused. Love how it went towards the healthy soil, healthy forage, so on and so forth, doing the dance, talking about the art of dairy farming, or being a grazer versus a cattleman.
Mm-hmm.
Just all really good stuff. So
Yeah. And I loved when he was talking about walking through the store and seeing it's like, oh, if I use this, oh, I have to use this to counter what this guy was trying to fix. And there was a byproduct, because that's going into every, store that you run into that problem so many times. It's like, if you just don't start down that line and you just look at your problems, from a natural standpoint and see what you got, chances are you can solve it with what you have. You don't have to buy a ton of insecticides or herbicides or fungicides to get your problem, to fix your problems. There's a lot easier ways of getting there with managing, through managing your garden, as opposed to just these supposed to be a quick fix. And there is no quick fix. There's always a price to be paid. There is no biological free ride.
that's right. Amen to that.
And John has never stopped learning. When he did that transition, every dairy farmer in the world would say, this is how we do things. This is what works. This is my system. John continues today to learn. And that's impressive
That
to
is,
me.
that's
Yeah, you
really
always gotta be
separates him
learning.
from so many other farmers that I've talked to, being willing to, take something new and, really pick up the ball and run with it. It sounds like he's really done that.
Yeah, it's a great example of not having that, that logical fallacy, argumentum antiquatum, right? This is the way we've always done it, and
Yes,
this is the way we're always going to do it, because this is the way we've always done it.
exactly.
And he's not. I mean, you heard it at the end. He said, "Come by, working on new projects." Started talking about trees. I'm like, "Holy cow! All right, what's that all about?" So we'll have to do a follow up at some point and talk about that.
I'm guessing
You
cows
just
like
said, holy
shade.
cow. You just said, holy cow.
Yep.
All right.
Oh, good. Well, hey, excellent interview. Bravo, Bill, for suggesting
Yeah,
John.
great guest.
And looking forward to doing this again very soon. And of course, we thank the listeners. A lot of positive feedback. I mean, this will be episode 3, right? This will end up being
I believe
episode
so.
3, I believe. It's and our second guest, and a lot of positive feedback thus far. So I'm going to do the corny lines here. Like and subscribe, comment, spread this around, share it with your friends. And until next time, guys.
All right. Until next time.